Okay, it is time, my friends. It is time to talk Wonder Woman. So we're going to do a Wonder Woman live read along today, where we're going to look at some of my favorite Wonder Woman comics. About by making Cavill this guy again. Hello and welcome to another episode of With Enough Prep Time. I'm your host, the Nerd Man, and today, as I told you, we will be doing a read along of my favorite Wonder Woman comics. Now, this is a new segment that I'm doing where I basically go over some of my favorite characters in comics and do an actual read along so that you can actually read with me as I read the first 10 or 20 pages to introduce you to some of the best comics I've read of theirs. So Wonder Woman, just to let you know a little bit about my knowledge or my relationship, I should say, with Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is actually probably it goes back and forth, but she's in my top 3 superheroes, and it's kind of hard to choose between them. It's like they're kind of like, it's kind of like children or something. You don't have a favorite child, but like certain children you like for some reasons, and other ones you like for other reasons. So it's just, like more, should I say, for one reason, and others you like more for other reasons. Now, my real interest in Wonder Woman is just the mythological aspect of the character. I think she is one of the most... I always put it like this. Certain characters have a universality to them and a universality to their story, which is what's always confused me about why people think Wonder Woman is such a struggle to understand, especially film people. But certain people have a universality to their story. And it is so universal, in fact, that I think that you could go back and explain the story of Wonder Woman to the ancient Greeks, and they would get it. I know they weren't very big on women being like strong kind of heroes, but they would understand it in the same vein as they would understand Hercules or stories of Calypso or the Amazons themselves. So Wonder Woman is kind of deeply mythological, and that's what I like about it. I think you could explain Superman or Batman to them as well. Certain characters like Shazam, even Spider-Man to a certain degree, if you turned it into a instead of the spider being radioactive, he's maybe some spider that is blessed by the gods or something like that, or whatever. So all of those characters, I believe, where they're deeply kind of mythological, are very interesting to me. And especially when there's a kind of timelessness about those characters, I think that that timelessness, where you can tell that person's story in any given period of time, like you could have told Superman's story, as I said, in ancient Greece, and I think it would have made as much sense to them as it does today. With slight variations on the context and stuff like that. Same with Batman. So, that being said, I do know a lot about Wonder Woman because she's, again, my third favorite hero, and one of my top 3 heroes. And the interesting thing about her is, is one, there's an interesting thing of how she was created, which I will go into after reading this first comic. She's created by William Moulton Marston, a Harvard professor of psychology who actually ended up inventing the lie detector. which he is now known for. So there's that. So her publication history and why she was created is very interesting. But the other interesting thing about Wonder Woman and her publication, and we might go into some of the bad runs of Wonder Woman as well, or runs that have been controversial amongst Wonder Woman fans, and we might go and look into some of those. Because her publication, she has had to be a character, the main female heroine who's supposed to be every bit as vital and influential as Superman. That's what she was created for, to be as powerful as he is. And she has had to exist as that within a hostile and sexist comic book industry that everything she was invented for, every impulse of comic book writers is to go against that, which is the kind of hilarious thing of having Wonder Woman as a character existing in within DC. You look at the average DC female character, it's like like some hottie with massive boobs and drawn with ridiculous proportions and all of that kind of thing. And Wonder Woman was never supposed to be that. She was supposed to be an antidote to that. She was supposed to be, as such, she was created by a feminist professor. And I'm not. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm not judging characters that are, like objectified and sexually explicit and all of that kind of stuff. I think there's space for that, within creativity. I think they're not. Sometimes they're not my favorite characters, to be fair, but I do understand there's space for that, within the comic book industry. But the problem is that because of this, and because it's such a male-dominated space, the comic book industry, Wonder Woman has often suffered as a character because everything she was invented for goes against what is the core. It goes against the core instincts and intentions of the publication that she's part of, which is DC Comics. So for instance, this thing about like being as powerful as Superman, that's not going to fly with all the Superman stands, right? In DC Comics, so you see her getting weakened often. You see her. At one point, they even took all of her powers away from her. At a certain point with Danny O'Neill. Then you've got other aspects to the character as well, which won't fly. They don't like the fact that she doesn't have a dad. Like this was a superheroine purposely created without a dad. She's supposed to come from an all-female. The goddesses created her with the, and gave her life with, and Hippolyta, breathed life into her or whatever. And that's how she was supposed to be. She's supposed to have no patriarchal line leading down to her. Unfortunately, they didn't like that at DC Comics. That was a challenge to their masculinity. So they had to do violence to that. And that has had impacts, which we'll talk about on the movies later on. And making the movies kind of coherent because it's gone against the kind of history of the character of the movies. And therefore, that's where you get things like Wonder Woman 84, where they didn't know what the fuck to do with the character because they couldn't use the stories, her most compelling stories, which, were about her origin and mystery surrounding that origin. So, okay, we have that. Last thing, what was I going to say? Last thing. So we could talk about all those things later. So her creation, the kind of sexist industry that is the comics industry, and why it goes against some of the core ideas and fundamental ideas of Wonder Woman. Yeah, okay. So let's read the first bit. This is from Wonder Woman Golden Age. So we're going to read the I love this picture. I think this is a what's his name? It's Justice League, a New Frontier, Cook, something Cook. Can't remember his name now. But love the artwork for the cover there. Oh, I forgot to get on Wonder Woman Earth 1 Part 2. I might buy it online now. Should I buy that online right now? Let's do it. Fuck it. Because I wanna read a part of that with you. We'll do that in 1 second. See how much it costs. Because I can actually get it on this. Oh, it's $4.79. Should I buy it? Fuck it, I'll buy it. If it verifies payment. Okay, so we're gonna go to Wonder Woman Sensation Comics. Oh, it was number 3, created on January 1943. Mission to Planet Eros. Oh no, this is a different one. This isn't the first. So was there a page before? Okay, there was a page before. Because I want to know when the first ever comic of hers was. Well, it's going to go into the first comic anyway, so I don't know why it's not there. So, introducing Wonder Woman. This was the first ever Wonder Woman comic. At last, in a world torn by the hatreds and wars of men, appears a woman to whom the problems and feats of men are mere child's play. A woman whose identity is known to none, but whose sensational feats are outstanding in a fast-moving world. With 100 times the agility and strength of our best male athletes and strongest wrestlers, she appears as though from nowhere to avenge an injustice or right a wrong. As lovely as Aphrodite, as wise as Athena, with the speed of Mercury and the strength of Hercules, she is known only as Wonder Woman. But who is she, or whence she came? Nobody knows. Good. So I just purchased Earth 1 Part 2, which has a very interesting relationship with this Golden Age stuff as well. So to begin with the strange history of Wonder Woman, let us go out over the sea and follow in the wake of a plane entirely out of gasoline as we watch it flounders helplessly in the sky and finally crashes on the shores of the uncharted isle set in the midst of a vast expanse of ocean. Bursting from the surrounding foliage, 2 beautiful figures race towards the wrecked plane. Look, princess, a strange plane. Well, what are we waiting for? Come on, let's see if anyone is hurt. Princess, it's a man on Paradise Island. Quick, let's get him to the hospital. So in the original, the women of Paradise Island, I don't know if they called it Themyscira yet. Even it's always very interesting, like with these early comics, because all of um, the elements of the mythology are there. I mean, this could have been told in a much more kind of a complex way, but they've done it as a kind of child story. But all the elements of the kind of mythology are there, but they haven't quite named everything. So for instance, I don't think they've called it Themyscira yet. I might be wrong, but I think they've just called it Paradise Island at the moment. And the Amazons are not like this backward civilization in the early comics. In fact, they're quite scientifically advanced. So carrying the full-grown man as if he were a child, the young woman steps through the foliage and enters the streets of a city that, for all the world, seems to be born of ancient Greece. A man. How did he get here? Someone tell the queen there's a man on Paradise Island. See, they call it Paradise Island now. At the hospital. At the hospital. Is he all right? Will he live? I don't know. He's had a concussion. We won't know anything for days. I wonder what the queen will do with him. He can't be moved. Suddenly, Hippolyta, the queen, enters the hospital room. Mother, the queen. I heard that there was a man here, but I couldn't believe it. Who is he? His plane crashed on the beach of the island this morning. The princess and Marla brought him here. I found these papers in his pocket. Captain Stephen Trevor, U.S. Army Intelligence Service. We can't fly. We can't let him die. See that he gets the best of attention. Keep his eyes covered so that if he should awake, we will see nothing. Have his plane repaired for me, for he must leave as soon as he is well. Keep me informed of his progress. Another interesting thing you should know about me is I actually wrote a script for Wonder Woman uh, way before the Wonder Woman movie came out. Um, and it's so interesting because what I did writing the script, I'm going to see if I can find it. So I'll share a little bit of it with you later on. Um, what I did with the script, yeah, I found it here. Good. I'll even show you my casting. But what I did with the script that I wrote was that I just read a bunch of Wonder Woman comics, right? Um, and watched the animated film, and then I was like reading up on ancient Greek, mythology and all of that kind of stuff as well, to inform the story. And then I just started writing, I had a couple of notes here and there from things, but then I just started kind of writing and the story, the outline of the story, and then writing the script. And it's so interesting how, like, I just picked up on things because in my story, Marla is her best friend, but Marla isn't like her best friend in all of the different versions of Wonder Woman. Like, she's not like Jimmy, what's his name, Superman's Jimmy Olsen. She's not like that kind of reoccurring figure. I think she figures kind of sparsely throughout certain runs of Wonder Woman. Certain runs she's in, certain runs she's really not, that like the majority of them she's not in. But somehow I kind of picked up on that, and even without like referring specifically to this early comic, I ended up writing Marla as her best friend. Um, uh, you know, um, and it clearly came from me reading this, which was probably one of my first readings of Wonder Woman. I made no notes on the character, nothing. I just was like, oh, Marla's a cool name, and like kind of, you did that. So it's funny to see that actually I got it from here. The princess and Marla brought him here. I found these papers in his pocket. Captain Steve Trevor, U.S. Army Intelligence Service. We can't let him die. See that he gets the best of attention. And also when I was doing this script, I read a lot about the history of Wonder Woman, and I was like, they should make a movie about this because it's really interesting. They ended up making a movie about it. It wasn't as good as it could have been. It should have been a much better movie, but they did end up making a movie about the creation of Wonder Woman. But I think they should do that with all the DC characters, actually, specifically Superman and Batman, because they have really interesting stories of how they were created. And it's so funny that at DC, it wasn't like Marvel, where Stan Lee just created all the different characters in one different universe. It was like these three very separate, very different types of people who created Batman, Superman, and then Wonder Woman. And yet they all fit together very perfectly as a trinity. So it's a very weird kind of thing that happened with them. And also, if you have any questions, let me know. So keep his eyes covered so that if he should awake, he will see nothing. Have his plane repaired, for he must leave as soon as he is well. Keep me informed of his progress. In the ensuing days, the princess, the queen's only daughter, is constantly at the bedside of the unconscious man, helping, watching. You ought to get some sleep, princess. You have been on the job now for 14 hours. Never mind me. We must make him well. Leaving the princess to watch over the injured pilot, the doctor seeks an audience with the queen. What has happened that you disturb me at this hour? Is the man? No, he is alive. It's the princess I am worried about. I don't think she ought to be allowed in the hospital anymore. She acts rather strangely about that man. So she is in love? I was afraid of that. You're quite right, doctor. I shall take steps immediately. That would be wise. It's for the child's own good. So they don't want her around the they don't want him around Steve Trevor. And so the princess, forbidden the pleasure of nursing the only man she can recall ever having seen in her life, goes to her mother Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. But mother, I don't understand. I must see him. I must know who he is, how he got here, and why he must leave. I love him. Yeah, this is a bit strange. I was afraid, daughter, that the time would someday arrive that I would have to satisfy your curiosity. Come, I will tell you everything. And this is the startling story unfolded by Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, to the princess, her daughter. Oh, wow. And then they tell the whole story of how Hercules came to get the golden girdle. Okay, so I'll read this out. This is going to be long though. In the days of ancient Greece, many centuries ago, we Amazons were the foremost nation in the world. In Amazonia, women ruled, and all was well. Then one day, Hercules, the strongest man in the world, stung by taunts that he couldn't conquer the Amazon women, selected his strongest and fiercest warriors and landed on our shores. I challenged him to personal combat because I knew that with my magic girdle given me by Aphrodite, goddess of love, I could not lose. And when I did, but Hercules, by deceit and trickery, managed to secure my magic girdle. And soon we Amazons were taken into slavery. And Aphrodite, angry at me for having succumbed to the wiles of men, would do naught to help us. Finally, our submission to men became unbearable. We could stand it no longer, and I appealed to the goddess Aphrodite again, this time not in vain, for she relented, and with her help I secured the magic girdle from Hercules. With the magic girdle in my possession, it didn't take us long to overcome our masters, the men, and taking from them their entire fleet, we set sail for another shore. For it was Aphrodite's condition that we leave the man-made world and establish a new world of our own. Aphrodite also decreed that we must always wear these bracelets fashioned by our captors as a reminder that we must always keep aloof from men. Right. So this is interesting. So I always liked the idea of the Amazons. Actually, it was a difference in my script that the Amazons didn't rely on the gods to help them to escape Hercules, but actually they just got out of it themselves. Because they were great warriors, but the queen had been captured, and then as great warriors, they kind of fought to free the queen. I thought that's better than like having to pray to the gods to help them. And so, after sailing the seas many days and many nights, we found Paradise Island and settled here to build a new world with its fertile soil, its marvelous vegetation, its varied natural resources. Here is no want, no illness, no hatreds, no wars. And as long as we remain on Paradise Island and I retain the magic girdle, we have the power of eternal life. So long as we do not permit ourselves to be again beguiled by men, we are indeed a race of wonder women. And interestingly enough, there was something I took from. I liked all of this, but I didn't feel like there was a good enough reason that the gods gave them this island. So I always thought that the idea from the Justice League animated cartoon was kind of neat, where um, Paradise Island was like built on top of, or was an island on top of, where the gods imprisoned all of the most deadly creatures and stuff from mythology, and the evil gods and like Ares and stuff like that. So I had them live atop Doom's doorway, and they're actually there to protect Doom's doorway from the outside world. So if Doom's doorway opens, it's kind of like Pandora's box, and all hell's breaks loose. So that was my thought on, because again, this is a really, really good, open story, right? Like kind of like the same way as Batman, where you can take like the events and elements of this story and build around it an even more coherent structure. But all of the elements, the basic elements, are there for a superhero mythology where you can expand and do various different adaptations and stuff like that. So that's what I like about this story. Okay, so that was the promise of Aphrodite, and we must keep our promise to her if we are to remain here safe and in peace. That is why the American must go, and as soon as possible. Come, let me show you the magic sphere you've heard me talk about. It was given to me by Athena, the goddess of wisdom, just after we conquered the Herculeans and set sail for Paradise Island. It's through this magic sphere that I have been able to know what has gone on and is going on in the other world, and even at times forecast the future. Wow. I don't remember this bit. That is why the Amazons have been able to far surpass the inventions of the so-called man-made civilization. We are not only stronger and wiser than men, but our weapons are better, our flying machines are further advanced, and it is through the knowledge that I have gained from this magic sphere that I have taught you, my daughters, all the arts and sciences and languages of modern as well as ancient times. But let us see where your American captain came from and how he got here. Watch closely. This is Wonder Woman. What the magic sphere reveals. Sir, I've come to report that I have at last uncovered information as to who the leaders of the spy ring are. I'd like permission to close in on them personally, it says Captain Trevor. But that's ridiculous, Captain. You're the most valuable man in the Army Intelligence Department. We can't risk losing you. But these that may be, sir, but these men are dangerous, and capturing them is a job I'd rather not shift on anyone else's shoulders. I'd hoped you'd understand, sir. Hmm. I believe I do, son. I believe I do. Go to it, and the best of luck to you. And this is great because this is actually, uh, this is actually at this time, Wonder Woman was on par and selling alongside with Superman. You kind of see why. Like the story's kind of like, I think, quite gripping. Um, Even though, again, you know, these are, when you read these early comics, they're really, really basic. you know, so that night, Steve Trevor drives to a hidden airfield not far from the Army Air Base. Those rats have their planes hidden here. Von Storm should drive past here any minute. If I can capture him, their leader, a cleanup job will be simple. Meanwhile, in another car approaching Steve's hiding place. Tonight, we strike. We send our planes into the stratosphere where they cannot be seen and bomb American airfields and training camps. Singe our planes. Singe our planes will not be identified. It cannot be construed as an act of. Since our planes cannot be identified, it will not be construed as an act of war. Suddenly, as the car passes Steve's hiding place, uh, fascist. I think it means fascist. Just take it easy, boys. You've got company. If you'll be good enough to stop the car and step out quietly, there won't be any trouble, gentlemen. The driver swerves the car suddenly and crashes into a tree. Good work, Fritz. Gentlemen, the quick thinking of our driver has netted for us an American officer. He is just hurt, not unconscious. He will come in handy for our plans tonight. Okay, interesting. So that was the beginning of the first ever issue of Wonder Woman. I've gone to page 12. Um, I read this. It wasn't one of my favorite Wonder Woman comics that I read, simply because I think a lot of better stuff has been done in more recent time with Wonder Woman. So I'm gonna switch up a bit to stories I found more compelling. But I really like the fact that all the basic kind of elements of the character are there, and all the basic elements of her origin story are there. And I think her origin story is a very good origin story. I think it's one of, in fact, the better origin stories amongst superheroes. Um, Guy lands on island. This secret island after getting, an intelligence officer, and he's somehow crash lands on this island. Wonder Woman finds him, and he's the first man she's ever met. He ends up, they end up, or Steve Trevor ends up telling her about like some danger out in the real world or out in man's world, that she feels the need that she has to go and help him to save people. I think it's solid, and there's more aspects to it with how she was born, being made of clay and all of that kind of stuff. And then here you see the trial where she has to hide her identity, of course, just behind like a little mask because it's comic books, and her mother wouldn't know, like her own daughter, because she's just wearing a little mask. But in any case, uh, this was basically the part where, and I think they should have had this in the movie. I don't know why they didn't have this in the movie, because it would have been, I think, a really good action set piece as well, to break up some of the, I think some of the story, which just kind of like, I think Wonder Woman 1 could have done with like at least 10 to 20% more action in it. Um, and so here is a trial basically that they have to prove who is the most fierce Amazon, and they will be the one to lead Steve Trevor back to man's world so that they can discover what this danger is and help him out in saving the world. And obviously, Diana disguises herself and ends up winning and becoming Wonder Woman. So that is Sensation Comics #1. There's another book that I ought to read quickly. I want to go over it quickly, but I don't know if they have it as a. I don't have this on my Kindle as well, and I completely forgot about it, and I should get it. Maybe I will do it another time. I just wanted you to have a look at it because it's by I think one of the best writers of Wonder Woman ever. But it's a little bit dated, but it's the thing that the basic storyline of the movie Wonder Woman 2017 was based on this book. I think it might be 1986 and onwards. It might be here. Let's see. Let's make sure I can't find it. Yeah, it's definitely among these ones. I mean, actually, you'll find it in Wonder Woman's Greatest Battles. So I can show you a bit from here. But the comic writer of this, I'm trying to remember his name. It's not that I don't remember him. I actually remember him quite well, but like I'm just bad with names sometimes. When I have to remember them, I'm just like I'm really terrible with it. So yeah, it is. This is this it? No. It's definitely the same art style, but I'm not sure if this is the writer. But he did one with her fight against Ares. So let's see if I can find this again. So let's go and make sure if it's in here. Does it have a contents page? Table of contents of Gods and Man's, Jerry Conway. Yeah, here is Blood. Okay, so Blood of the Cheetah, which I haven't read, by George Perez. So George Perez was my guy. Like he was my first into Wonder Woman, apart from the animated film. And the animated film was like a revelation to me because I watched it and I was like, I don't think it's the greatest DC animated movie. I enjoy it a lot, but I feel like it's a great. There's a great movie in it, but it needed to be longer and everything needed to be fleshed more out because it was really interesting and fun and the characters were funny and charming. And I thought the origin story was really cool, but it needed like just a couple of bits just to explain things just a little bit more rather than just rushing through everything. And I know I think it would have been one of the best DC animated movies ever. But it got me into wanting to research Wonder Woman. So the first thing I did was I tried New 52, and I was like, this is nothing like the film I just watched, and I'm not really loving this. And then I found out a lot of people didn't like the New 52 as well. So then I moved on to um, George Perez, and that was the first one I read. And I was like, I like George Perez a lot. I love the artwork, I love the storytelling. But the one thing I did think it was a little bit like I could see why in the 80s it was so popular, but I felt like the story was really good, but they needed a fresh update of that story. And that's one of the things that I couldn't find a lot of, which was just like Wonder Woman origin stories, like just retellings of her origin story, the way that they did, like Superman Birthright or Batman Year One, like modern updated versions. The only version I could find at the time, which was in what about 2006 or 7 or 8 or maybe 9, 2009 or 10, around that time, the only version I could find of Wonder Woman's origin story was George Perez. Now recently, since I think about the time that the Wonder Woman movie was announced, we've now had like a few different updated Wonder Woman origin stories, and most of them are pretty good. But it's sad that it took that long to have as many like really great versions of her origin story or great versions of the character, like where interesting writers wanted to work on Wonder Woman until the movie came out or around the time the movie was announced. But that's the power of movies, because you'll notice that even with Superman and Batman, that once their movies came out, it was around those times that people really, or their TV shows and stuff like that, it became hits. It was around those times that always you get a lot of creative energy around the character, because I think what the writers think is, oh, well, if I write this character, maybe some of my ideas will make it into the movies. So to read this, uh, I've never read this comic before, so this is interesting. This is probably one of the second parts of his story, but this is the birth of Cheetah, according to Perez, who I read his Gods and Mortals, or Gods and Monsters, Wonder Woman Gods and Mortals, or Gods and Monsters, and that's a really great comic, and I recommend it. But I've never read his stuff on Cheetah. So listen, can you hear it? Traffic. What I love about George Perez is his writing. And he draws all this stuff as well. He's a great writer, and actually um, he's great at you know he does his own like comic art as well. This is a lot darker than the version we got in the movie. Oh, the script is by Len Wein. It's not by George Perez, actually. This one. Interesting. I'm gonna disappear for a while, but I'll be back. See, this is one thing in the movie. She should have been flying from the beginning. I also wanted to bring this character back, Mindy Meyer, who was her publicist. So I like this already. Midtown Boston later that same morning. I always wish they'd given Wonder Woman a solid city of her own. I always proposed that there was a run that was really bad of Wonder Woman, but the one thing the guy did, I'm trying to remember who the writer was, but the one good thing he did was he gave her a city, and it was Gateway City, and I thought, well, that works. Use Gateway City for Wonder Woman. That would have been, you've got Gateway, you've got Metropolis, and you've got Gotham. It completely makes sense. This is already so much better than the script for Wonder Woman 1984. It's so hilarious. They should have just done this, just brought this to life, and it would have been better. Yeah, in a way. They didn't even say once in the movies, "May Hera help us." My God, it's as if Patty Jenkins didn't even read the comics. You might say, one might say, eh? Okay, interesting. So this is the first introduction of Cheetah into the run by George Perez. I like it. It's interesting. I'd like to go a bit further with it. I'd like to read it a little bit more. But one thing I will say is I always thought the first volume of George Perez was the most impressive. As I tried to read on, it kind of didn't capture me as much as a certain writer, and I'm going to share with you now probably my favorite one of Wonder Woman ever. Like my favorite single writer, should I say, of Wonder Woman. So let's share now, and we will go straight to what is the best, in my opinion, Wonder Woman run. Not the best Wonder Woman comic, but the best run of Wonder Woman that I've ever read. And that is by Greg Rucka. You can see I've already got to the middle of it. But it's by Greg Rucka, and it's called Eyes of the Gorgon. Sorry, sorry. The whole run is good, but the best story in this run is called Eyes of the Gorgon. So here you see in the beginning of this comic, Greg Rucka really expanded the world so that, you know, the gods were kind of involved in Wonder Woman's world. You know, you actually directly see all of the gods. You know, and to be fair, Perez did this as well. But the gods really become part of this whole melodrama and expansive world of Wonder Woman, where they're constantly politicking and either siding with the Amazons or going against the Amazons. And here you see his versions of Athena, or Pallas as she's called in this. You see the Egyptian gods, you see some of the Western gods as well, Aphrodite. But I'm going to go to the part where we finally kind of meet Wonder Woman and see where she's at. So the first part of this comic was actually a fight between a Wonder Woman and one of her main villains, Silver. I was going to say Silver Surfer, but Silver Swan, who's not my favorite Wonder Woman villain. I think she's a little bit silly. But actually, Greg Rucka did some great work with her, where he made one of Wonder Woman's main kind of supporting cast. He made her into Silver Swan, so it made the rivalry between them a lot more personal. So New York. So we'll read through some pages and see where Wonder Woman's at in this story. Okay. So this is Silver Swan. Wonder Woman has defeated her, and she's been made into a Silver Swan by like cybernetic means, and Wonder Woman is trying to heal her. So Dr. Anderson was one of Wonder Woman's allies as well. So this is basically Wonder Woman's supporting cast, which should have been in the movies, but they messed it up with all this time jumping and time hopping and stuff like that. If they had set it in the modern day, then they could have brought all of this supporting cast, because she has a supporting cast just like Superman and Batman, that are really good, including. So, I mean, they got in one of the main ones, which is Etta Candy. Obviously, they had Steve Trevor, but they didn't have the Capitalises. They didn't have, Dr. Anderson and other characters like that. And this is another main character, Ferdinand, who's the cook. So just to let you know, like Wonder Woman, basically in this book, um, is actually an ambassador, and that's a job. Um, what happened there? I don't know what happened. Where? Yeah, good. Yes, Wonder Woman's an ambassador, and she resides in New York this time, and she's at her main place of, like say her civilian, because she doesn't hide her identity. She's always Wonder Woman in these comics because she's the avatar of truth. So she doesn't believe in secret identities, which for me made a lot more sense to Wonder Woman's character than having her, running around as Diana Prince or whatever they've made her into in the movies, right? So that was from the early comics that Morton Marston did, where he made her Diana Prince, but it evolved and they made her so she doesn't have a secret identity. People know she is Diana, Princess of Themyscira, and she's an ambassador here from the Amazon Islands, essentially, or from Themyscira, and she resides in Themyscira House. Right, makes sense. Like in New York City, which is the embassy for Themyscira in Man's World. So she's the top ambassador. makes a lot more sense than other versions of what they made her into in the comics. And I don't know why they didn't keep. Yeah, that's the problem with Wonder Woman. They keep trying to reinvent the wheel as if there's a problem with the character when there's no problem with the character. It's just the character needs exposure. And I'm not saying I'm against her having another job. She can have another job, like work in a museum or whatever. I think it's stupid. I don't think it really it doesn't work for the character uh, that well. I mean, it's doable, but it's not the best thing for her to be hiding in a museum. Whereas her as a public figure working as an ambassador, gets her out to places, and in the middle of things and discussions that is more relevant to, like the way Superman's a journalist, right? Like, so he's going to be seeing all the corruption, so investigating Lex Luthor, doing all of that kind of stuff. Her working as an ambassador makes sense in getting her out there. Rather than working in a museum, because there's no connection between museums and, like, say, crime, for instance, right? um or like, there's no reason for somebody who's working at a museum to be investigating shit like that. But anyway, um what I do wish is, even if they're gonna choose a crappier version of what she should be, they should just choose one and stick with it, not like always change it all the time like they've been doing. But I think ambassador works way better. So the ambassador, this is Ferdinand. He's the cook for the Amazons. Oh, he's the cook for Themyscira House. And as you can see, he's Minotaur, Minotaur or whatever. And I thought he should be in the film as well. I thought it would have been cool to have him in there. See, the artwork is nice in this. I really like the artwork, especially when you get it close up. Um, but I do feel like one of the things that has held this whole run back from being a classic is that it hasn't got the kind of modern artwork that people like. If you read some of the, like the Gary Frank style and that kind of style of things. But I think the DC Comics should push this comic a lot more, because this could have been a great. This would have again. This would have been a fantastic sequel to the Wonder Woman one, especially when you see what happens and who the villains are. Sorry, I didn't read that bit. And there's a lot of politics in this one, which I really like as well. There's a lot of stuff going on. So now you see the villains of this. particular thing, which is the Gorgon sisters. And then you have Cersei as well, who's working behind the scenes, one of Wonder Woman's main villains, who would have been great to work along the Gorgon sisters of the villains for Wonder Woman 2. Again, don't know why they didn't do it. It's also expansive, like this story. Um, and here you'll see one of Wonder Woman's powers that she had prior to this new 52 trash reboot, where she could actually somewhat communicate with animals, not like on the Aquaman level or something like that, but she had like a kind of animal empathy. Yes, this does look like the place, doesn't it? Thank you. So she has a kind of animal empathy, which I wish she still had. I also like the fact that she isn't wearing bloody high heels, which I always thought was really stupid in the movies as well. Ooh. So yeah, that's the beginning of this Wonder Woman story. Eyes of the Gorgon. I highly recommend it. As it picks up, you get more and more into the kind of issues of the politics going on in this story, and it ends with some an interesting, one of the best Wonder Woman fights between Wonder Woman and the Gorgon sisters. I found this highly entertaining. It was hard to put down once you kind of get into the story. There was one volume before this that you might want to read before getting into this book. That was that kind of sets up all the characters and the stakes and stuff like that. But it's really unnecessary to get into. But again, the whole politics of this and the expansiveness of the world of Wonder Woman, this is one of her most coherent stories, and that's why I enjoy it a lot. Not just what I mean. Again, with Wonder Woman, what you find is there are people who try and re they try and rewrite the wheel as such with Wonder Woman, and it never um, pans out. You know, they try and change up too much, but the ones who actually go back and are actually really um, respectful of her law, but do something different. Often they're the ones who get the you know, do the best stories of Wonder Woman. That being said, I'm gonna come back for a part two of this. Maybe in say a few hours, where I'll do a part two, and we'll go over some of the other comics I like of Wonder Woman. Thank you.